the world. Number 1 is ByteDance, TikTok. Number 2 is SpaceX. Number 3 is Shein. So 2 of the top 3 software startups in the world are in Beijing. The hardware capital is in Shenzhen. And that proximity and that speed of development, it can only be found in China. And people want to move out of China. Tim Cook just announced this week that he's actually moving some chip devs to the US. But good luck doing it. Can it be done though? Can it truly be done in a way like the market is spoken and the market likes the cost base and the speed of China. So I think a lot of the lower end stuff is going to be try to be replicated outside of China, but can anything higher up the value chain be truly done elsewhere? And it remains to be seen.
Well, Rich, pretend I'm Tim Cook, and you want to give me advice on my goal of moving some percentage of this stuff out. What should I be doing to do that? Where should I be looking to go?
I mean, you should be...
And Tim is paying you a huge salary for this consulting right now.
Yeah, so he would be paying a huge salary for me to tell him that he's going to be paying even more money elsewhere. Because even if you could replicate in some small way, and they're going to be spending billions and billions for chip dev in the US, the rest of the manufacturing supply chain, all of the labor supply and all of the ability to be able to switch the assembly line, all of the distribution, I don't think there is an answer. There is no answer right now. There isn't a place to just go, you know what, we're just going to move this all to India, or we're just going to move this all to Africa, or there is no solution. And I think there's a lot of talk and desire about it, but I think I would say, here's my fee, and the answer is, well, bonjour, I don't know.
Well, what if Jim had an inexhaustible supply of capital from the Defense Department, and I don't know, a 5-year plan, a 7-year plan, could it be done?
I don't know, it seems to me that the Defense Department has almost an inexhaustible supply of capital from Apple, from all of the taxes, but yeah, could it realistically be done? I don't believe so. I don't believe that there is any, these gentlemen here, I'm much more of a software guy, I'm much more of a China guy in some ways, but I'm a keen student of this, and I don't see that there's if you're making lawn furniture, sure, right? Or if you're making something, perhaps even, a little bit more of the value chain, but anything like an iPhone. And I think the narrative is that we're exploiting labor in China, but I think the true narrative is that the market is spoken and people are very comfortable paying the price that they pay, and if they really truly want to pay more, then they're welcome to do that. But I think what would happen is that there would be somebody else that's still going to manufacture in China, and they're just going to undercut whatever else is available in the market.
So I'm a macroeconomist, and what you're telling me is that the market would not allow this to happen. But if the US banned the import of iPhones from China, then you can't undercut the manufacturer in Taiwan or the manufacturer in the States. But you're also saying it would take 5, 7, 10 years to build up that kind of supply chain.
I believe so. China's a competitor, China's a cooperation partner, and China's also an adversary. That's all those 3 things at once, and that relationship between China and the US is probably the most important relationship. I said in the last class there's a comedian called Joe Wong, and he lived 20 years in the States, and he's a US citizen, but he had a TV show in China, and he said, the US is my wife, and China is my mother. And I'm hiding the kitchen because my mother and my wife are having a fight, and they both have nuclear weapons. How frightening is that? So that relationship is hugely important. Some of it is adversarial. We can't share, chipset and other sensitive data. Some of it is very cooperative. They need to buy our soybeans. We need to buy their other stuff. But a lot of it is very competitive as well too, and we just need to be better, I think, to engage and be a better competitor as well.
Mathias, would you like to question Rich or make a comment on something he said? Yeah.
Yes, I can definitely totally agree, and I'm from the automotive world, and it's definitely totally agree to what Rich is saying, especially about the time frame. You were asking, can it be replaced as a manufacturing hub? I say also no, and you were saying like a not pessimistic, but a limited optimistic view, saying it's, and I would even say it's actually, it would take 20 to 30 years to do that. And it would also require, I think it's the real solution also considering the markets that you were highlighting, the market's working and efficiency that needs to be always there. It's going to be like a rearrangement of supply chain, the reconfiguration that has been said yesterday by our Thai ex-minister speaker. And it will be actually, in the end, just new suppliers coming up, hopefully also in Southeast Asia and in India. But this takes 20 to 30 years of supplier development. And I mean, we've done that before. We've qualified suppliers in China before, also from Germany 20 years ago. And we have that knowledge to do it again, but it takes so much time. And I think it's, but it's also on the other hand cost attractive to go there. So I think it's just a movement that's starting right now. Yeah, that's my statement.
Vimal, do you have any comment you'd like to?
Sure. At some point of time, I would like to go through my slide deck also to put that into perspective. But I would agree with him to an extent in the sense that in the immediate future, I don't think there's any replacement for China, more from sourcing, whether it's low-tech like lawn furniture or for high-tech products. But Apple recently came to India. They're doing about $1 billion in sales, iPhone 14 or whatever that is, the latest iPhone. I'm an Android user. I'm not an iPhone user. And they're on mark to get to $2 billion. Samsung also is doing that. Now, it's a drop in the ocean compared to the overall iPhone ecosystem, but it's a beginning. Yeah, it's a beginning for iPhone and beginning for India in that sense. So the issue is, can there be a rival to China? We have to put things into perspective. We have to remember China grew up because the US and Europe opened its markets. It's not independent of that. All right. Now, if the US and Europe decided to open markets to other parts of the world in a similar manner in the WTO regime, consider that democracies, consider that we push and pulls of different kinds in different countries, like in India, we have various pushes and pulls. For a country like India to rival China in the short term will be limited, number one. And number two, India has a humongous domestic market which China is trying to revive, consumer spend in China itself, whereas India has a humongous consumer demand in various industries. So Indian companies are not outward looking. I think now the pressure is coming for India to look outward. So a couple of industries, for example, ceramic tiles, China was ruling the roost until now. India has replaced China as the go-to source for ceramic and vitrified tiles into Europe and the US. So now India is coming to a point, for example, APIs, that is application or rather for pharmaceutical intermediates. API industry was almost considered to China. India used to manufacture for cost reasons. It migrated completely to China. Now the whole API industry is coming back to India. It's almost 80%, 90% of APIs will be manufactured in India through various product-linked incentive schemes, etc., etc.
Okay. Mathias, why don't you make your presentation? Yep.
Yes, sure.
Call up the slides for Mr. Alt, please.
Do we do that standing or? Okay.
I think
It's better to.
Young man should sit.
Medium for the neck, I guess. So, yes, this is a company I've started, GetAhead, after the IBEAR. I graduated this year, quite early in May, and then I went to Singapore to start a company. It was very convenient and a very good process, I must say. And so what are we doing at our company, GetAhead? Probably, next slide. So who are we? We are a team of 4 right now. So me, I'm the founder of the company. We have 2 sourcing specialists, and we also have another corporate secretary. And we are specializing in offering sourcing services for clients that are small and medium-sized Western companies. So small and medium-sized in Western countries is maybe a different size unit than here in Asia. So these companies are already like, you can see the picture on the right, they are very specialized global players in Germany, maybe not so known like by name, but they are of course also requiring a lot of components from Asia. So this is the focus group. So basically because these companies, they often lack resources to organize sourcing. So, and also like new activities, strategic shifts in sourcing. So we help with that as a service. So that's kind of the business idea. And we are, yeah, in fact, 90 days older than our son Theo, who was born in July 1, also like part of the MBA. So maybe in the future I live 75, that depends on the admission. I don't want to interfere here.
I like that future planning. That sounds good.
We already dressed him up like that, so we are hoping that he one day might become. So this is a target group, and we have also another mantra or another principle, which is we focus on engineering-intensive products. So if it would be office supply products that you want to source now instead of in China, that you want to source them now in Vietnam, this is not our scope of expertise. And I will tell you why. Next slide, please. And that's because we are actually applying a lot of what I have learned from the automotive context and world in terms of engineering principles, but also in terms of engineering collaboration. So if you do sourcings, you need to do a lot of requirements checks. So what does the engineer actually need? And so this, the automotive ground is actually, the automotive industry is a perfect breeding ground for our company that I've founded, because we have a high diversity of technological items in the car. We have, starting from complex displays, which you see at the bottom left, which is like a head-up display, it's beaming information into the windshield, down to like AC units where you kind of use a lot of copper to have like a condenser and this very traditional technology. So you have all of that combined in the car, and I've been also managing car products, at least the buy part of the cars. So I have a good overview and also of the supply markets. And that's now being reutilized in a different context. So for example, our first customer, they are building data centers in the US and also in the future abroad. Also might also go to crypto mining in the USC, but mainly data centers. And what they are doing basically is, you see to the right, this is not a data center, right? There's no servers in there, there's no computers. So this is actually a cooling facility for the data center also being built there. So what we are mainly helping this customer to source is not really the servers, it's more like the cooling technology, the pipes, of which requires some certain special materials, and also many other items that are required to actually cool down a data center. So that's basically our current client project. And so we kind of reutilize the knowledge from the automotive industry, also heavily China focused in the past and also of course in the future. You reutilize that and apply for new industries and also new markets. So next slide please. So but I want to stress this is the last slide, we are not a de-China, we're not in the de-China business. And I'm also going to comment on that later, and I think in the discussion we already kind of touched on this topic that can China be replaced, and it would be naive to say that. And also my background is, you can see, I studied in Singapore and Fudan University. I was part of the student union. I joined them as a foreigner. I was very graceful that they accepted me. And I also worked with Chinese ventures in the past, as Dr. Drobnick has mentioned. So in the end, I know the technology basis of China, their advantages. And as we learned yesterday from Professor Voigt's talk, good strategy is based on analyzing your counterpart, their weakness, but also relying on your own advantages. So if you have manufactured for like 30, 40 years, and if there's no die casting, no like tool shops in your country, would you really want to go into that technology again? Is that really good strategy? I don't know. I think we learned something different yesterday from Professor Voigt and his workshop or in his class. So we can discuss that further, I guess. But we are not naive. We know China has a role, a big role in this region. So it's also part of the map. And so what we mostly offer the customers is, it depends on their goals and their situation. So if the customer is really a pretty new technology intensive startup, they want to have products very fast. China is the market for us to kind of source from at first, because they have a high readiness of suppliers, they can immediately deliver, the logistics is perfect. But if we have another customer that's already having supplies from China, we might want to find alternative supplies and diversify their supply base. In that sense, we have more time to experiment with the supplier search and also supplier qualification. And then, of course, these other regions that we are actually specializing on as a company, in Southeast Asia and ASEAN markets, they really become crucial. And I've met an interesting person here, if I can say that, among our also alumni, pretty young, yesterday, and they are actually family business producing rattan for the car industry. So they were doing furniture, but they are applying now the same as I do. I transfer technology and methods from the automotive industry. They transfer their knowledge from furniture to become a rattan supplier, I think for like new car companies like NIO, and also they signed a contract with Porsche, and they're actually producing it in Indonesia. So I think this pretty much shows up the potential of the industry here, and how they can also enter new markets, and they will enter new markets, and how we can, as a global supply chain and work order, rearrange that. So I think it's just a matter of time and rearrangement of the global work order, and definitely countries in this region will definitely take off a new role in this whole game, yes. And they need to, because the labor force in China, for example, is also drastically shrinking. They are aging, so there needs to be a shift to the younger populations, as in Indonesia. And I've learned from Indonesia, my Indonesian friend, that we definitely have a lot of young labor here in Indonesia, a lot of young people, a strong base of young generation that is still to join the workforce. So there's a lot of potential, and I'm really happy to be here and to discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you. Vimal or Rich, any question or comment for Mathias?
Why going beyond
I actually marked it in not dark red.
Vimal says, why no India on your map?
I marked it in, I've definitely also marked it in red color because it's actually the business activity. So the more we are active, the more red it is, and the less. So we need to extend our activities, and I hope you can help with that.
Welcome.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Vimal, your turn. Can you put Mr. Ambani's slides up, please?
So this is the slide that I'm going to start off with. Is we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years, or underestimate the change that is going to occur in 2 years. But we always underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10 years. These are the small, long alpha waves, with low amplitude waves, but it just carries the change along. So that's what we tend to do. The next slide, please. So what we're looking at is what are the mega trends, that disrupt business in India and provide the new growth opportunities in India. So first is there's no clarity on these slides. I am sorry about that. Let me have a quick look at my papers. Sorry about that. What we are looking at is China plus one kind of strategy, where there is a lot of political shift away from China, or rather the desire. The actual shift is not happening, and I don't think it will happen anytime soon. Number one. And number two, I don't think, irrespective of anything like that, China, you cannot ignore China. China is a great country, very productive manufacturing, very competitive with a lot of animal spirits. So I don't think the objective is to replace China in any sense. Anybody who says we're going to replace China or looking at replacing China, I don't think is talking in the right sense. Business, at the end of the day, business issues matter, and that's what's going to dictate business decisions. Secondly, what's happening in India is unlocking the next wave of consumers in India. India up till now was always a patriarchal society. Not women as a part of the workforce, women as part of the community were not addressed to. There are $3 billion unicorns which have come up in India in the last 6 months, all addressing women's needs. One is Nika, which is ex-merchant banker from I believe a bank of I don't know which bank. Anyway, she started a company for women's cosmetics. It's a unicorn right now and doing brilliantly well. There are 2 other companies also, which have all come up in the last 6 months. And this unlocking of this business is the way India is changing. It's almost in the last 1 year I've seen more investment going into new businesses, into completely unexplored areas, agriculture, water treatment facilities, things like that, or district cooling efficiencies, or or for example, when India had a war with Pakistan over Kargil, that's northern part of India, Kashmir. US refused to give us GPS data on movements, despite the partnership, so-called partnership. So India went ahead and developed its own navigation technology now, which is actually in commercial use by the Indian Army. So we developed our own GPS satellite systems for Indian applications, so covering Bangladesh, India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, etc. So when push comes to shove, I think a lot of us will put our this. And you have to remember, when India became independent in 1947, Food and Agriculture Organization, World Health Organization, almost who's who of the think tanks of the world, said India is going to balkanize in 10 years, India is going to be food dependent country, will always be begging for food, etc., etc. And today, at that time we must be about 200, 300 million people in terms of population. Today we are 1.2 billion. We are feeding India and exporting surplus. We are the great exporters, etc. Sugar, we are the largest sugar exporter. We are the largest dairy producers in the world. So, push comes to shove, I think opportunity is there. How you address that opportunity and how you rise to the occasion, I think that's what's going to happen. If you look at then there's a strong interest from financial investors also. There's almost, by some estimates, there's about $2.5 trillion of dry powder capital ready to be deployed by PE and VC firms. And this is not only in India. This is ready to be deployed across the world. I'm not saying it's ready to be deployed in India. And and the previous one, the multiplier effect on value creation, where I focus on ESG, environmental, social, and terms. India has exceeded its commitments on green energy that it had made commitments to in terms of solar power, etc. But I think a lot more needs to be done. For India, it's a different issue. It's independence from energy imports, and that's what the target is. And shifting profit pools with reduction in intermediaries, things like how do we cut out the middleman? I mean, in a very layman term, how do we cut out the middleman? And there's a tremendous amount of investments going on in that, and across in almost any and all industries put together. And yes, the issue is the economic uncertainty that arises. Next slide, please. And so the China plus one strategy, and I said China plus one, I'm not saying a replacement of China in any sense. There's ongoing political alignment provides an impetus for industries to have a second source of the location. And this is again not only from politics, even from other point of view. You'll always, like in the automotive industry, you'll always have two sources of supply. In the pharmaceutical industry, they'll always have two sources of supply. In case there's something goes wrong in any particular location, you always have. So, for example, there was floods in, there was an earthquake or something, I forget when, or what was the natural calamity. If that had gone beyond a certain limit, painkiller sales in the US would have stopped because all the ibuprofen that is goes into that finished drug is manufactured in Hyderabad in India. So had that facility been destroyed during that natural calamity, painkillers would have been stopped in the US. That's where the ibuprofen comes from actually. Government initiatives, a lot of government initiatives going on, and this is the first time I'm seeing government inducting people. For example, the UID, the Aadhaar card, which is the identity card, biometric identity card of India, which has given biometric identities to about 1.2 billion, 1.3 billion people across India now. Anybody can guess how many people would have been employed by UID? I doubt everybody will know, but it's 4 people. They have employed only 4 people in that authority. Everything is outsourced completely from day one on a profit basis. They invited companies to participate. Again, the idea being, let's not create a bureaucracy and that we will need to dismantle in the future. So, and this was led by a promoter of Infosys, one of the larger software companies of India. The Prime Minister brought him in from the industry, which was absolutely unique, completely different, and brought him in. And India is a low-cost manufacturing base because of availability more than the cost of labor. I think, as you rightly said, it's not about the cost of labor, but the number of machine tool guys that can find, and that's what it is. In India, you'll be able to find a lot more people. I think the last slide. I think the next slide is the last slide. Next one, please. and the demographics dividend. That's what we are looking at in terms of what was our middle class, lower middle class, and higher class income. And we are looking at, in 2005, about 1% was in the upper class. We are looking at in the 2018, about 3%, and by 2030, about 7%. Now we said 7%, but that's still 29 million people household, and upper middle is 168 million people. So we're looking at the size of European market and just the high and the middle income group of India. Forget, in terms of the lower middle and lower class. I mean, it's a huge growth opportunity, and so the premise of my submission is invest in India to participate with the growth in India, and maybe use it as a supply base for the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, Mathias, any direct comment on anything Vimal said other than Mathias, put India on your map next time? Well, put it on the brighter color, because you're going to increase doing things. And Vimal's going to help you.
Yes.
Right? Okay, that's good.
I'm on the National Council of SMEs today, so
Yeah, that's perfectly what we need, yeah.
I'm going to open this for questions now, but just one reminder, Vimal, just to, China's going to be here, and anyone that says we can replace China has things mixed up. You said it more politely than that. But Dr. Narongchai said it last night. Politicians tend to maximize fiction and minimize facts. And business people tend to maximize facts, and successful business people tend to maximize facts and minimize fiction. Questions? Sam, then Franklin. Again, identify yourself.
I'm Sam Chang, US, IBEAR 45. So I have a question in general for the panel. As you said, China's not going anywhere, but as a business owner, how do you respond to political pressures, or especially coming from the US, technology transfers, cross-border data transfers, and things like that?
Or quotas or outright bans. Mathias?
We are happy about that in the sense that that's our main driver of customers, actually, like one of the reasons why our current customer, for example, that's based in the US is definitely landed from the start. But we still, again, we advise him, okay, we know you want to diversify, but still plan A is still to source from China first as a base, because that's done quickly and very reliably. But then let's also go further and develop some plan B for you. So I think in the end it's, I'm in a consultancy, so we live from that change, obviously, and we try to help. But of course it's going to be a very relevant topic also for the next years.
Rich, any thoughts? So there's this export ban, US chips, certain chips can't go there anymore. What do companies do when faced with these political decisions?
Yes, certainly, as I mentioned before, there's an adversarial, there's a cooperative, and there's a also competitive aspect to the China relations. And I think anything that's adversarial, that's military-based, or something that's really sensitive or goes into industrial espionage, then of course that has to be off the table. But then on the cooperation side, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. People want to do deals. On the competition side, that's where things are a little bit more gray. And I believe that right now it's kind of like a Sputnik moment, where there was the launch of Sputnik by the Russians, and then JFK stepped up and started the space race, and that was something kind of like a beacon, a North Star for us to all rally around. And I think that's what the U.S. really needs to do right now, is to really, if we're talking about specifically U.S.-China relations, the U.S. really needs to step up and compete in a much more intentional way. Another aspect of China that really isn't spoken about is how efficient the government is in many ways. Tesla set up their gigafactory there in 168 days, and there was a lot of government approval there. It was like under budget, under time, and it was swept right through. And oftentimes you'll see, an airport in Germany or some sort of public works in the US that go triple, quadruple, quintuple over budget and time, and that's something that really needs to change. You know, I spent a few months ago, I was in Korea, and if you look at the Korean market, 0.6% of the world's population, 50 million people, but they're like, hey, we're gonna take the Oscar, the #1 show on Netflix, the #1 band in the world, the #1 sort of music category, #1 phone in the world besides the iPhone, electronics, cars as well too. It doesn't compute. They're such a small country. There's a lot of government support around what they do. And I believe in free market forces, but I also believe in the fact that in the US, we should have 5G technology. We should have light rail technology. We don't have it. We don't have the capability of actually doing anything with 5G. What? How does that make any sense whatsoever? And you can vilify the Chinese as much as you want for having that technology under Huawei, but we need to be able to have an alternative around that. We need to be able to truly step up. And I think that's something that needs to change. And I think there needs to be more intentional leadership in the government around directing resources.
Yeah, we the United States should not be saying that the Chinese are unfair because they work 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we don't want to. Or because their government wants to arrange things to invest heavily in infrastructure and so on and so forth. But we're like saying, no, you can't play that hard. Slow down. That's not the way to win anything. We got to change the mentality.
Yeah, it's like the Olympics, and I like if somebody's using steroids or drugs, like that's off the table. That's unfair, right? That's not cricket, right? But if you're if somebody's really training hard and doing very well, then don't hobble them. Train harder yourself. And I am not a panda hugger, nor am I necessarily a panda slugger. I just think we have to dance with the panda. We have to, right? We have to dance with the panda. Democracy is the worst form of government except for all other forms of government. That's for sure. So I'm not advocating, what's happening in China. All I know is that they ain't changing any more than any other country's gonna change. So we have to find a way to cooperate and compete.
I might just follow up on that. Democracy is the worst form of government. I think American democracy is one of the worst forms of government. It's perpetual election, the unlimited spending, it's just bizarre. Franklin, a second, can you get a microphone to this young man?
Thank you. Franklin, IBEAR 38. My question is for Mathias. So I live in Thailand where I see a lot of Great Wall Motor vehicles on the road now, these Havals, Oracats. And I'm just curious, with the rise of EVs, how is that changing the sourcing and supplier market in China as the tools and the raw materials and the know-how changes from petrol and diesel to electric?
Yes, it changes it, I think, drastically, but also not entirely different. So of course now the cars are being built around batteries, and they have now like new car architectures, like our company or my former company, Volkswagen has it, and Hyundai has it. They built the car around the battery. And it's really nice, fascinating, great. You see much more space inside. So, but what stays the same is first of all, of course, the seating and all these things you have inside, and the AC and all this technology. It's still there. So that's good news, but bad news for the West, especially, that it's heavily focused on combustion engine. Is of course in the engine you no longer have those engines, as you mentioned, and that means there's industries behind it. For example, in Germany, but also in other countries like Korea, for example, that are specialized in this fine machining of those parts for those machines. And of course, they are going to lose and need to replace business, like in Germany, and they are not in every aspect able to do that. One example might be, you can look it up, Mahle. It's a famous worldwide supplier of Germany, specialized also in these components for combustion engines, and they are heavily under pressure to change their business model, and they done it too late. So these companies, they come under fire, that's for sure. And new players, they are they are to be found in Asia, I think, a lot. The battery business is coming up here in Indonesia, it's already there in China. CATL is dominating the market, among others, and BYD as well. So we even have the vertical integration. The car manufacturers even manufacture their own batteries, like Tesla, like BYD. So that's really something that's now giving them a strategic advantage. And that's why you see these cars now also on the streets of Bangkok, or you will see many more of them in the future. And that's something that traditional car manufacturers from the West don't have as an advantage. So they have to look for new advantages, and we need to see how that plays out.
Microphone over here, Abram.
Hi, I'm Abram Arredondo, IBEAR 45. In 2021, the United States passed the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act in response to credible reports that Uyghur Muslims had been forced into slave labor to build solar panels and cotton textile industry materials. Was that the right thing to do? And are there certain moral thresholds you would have where you would cut out supplies from or imports from China if you hear about things like that?
Rich, even though you're a refugee here in Bali, you're the American on the panel. Want to respond to Abram's question?
Sure. When I talk about adversarial, I think there's military adversarial positions, but there's also moral and other foundational principles that are just adversarial to our values. And I don't think China's not going to change what it fundamentally is, and the U.S. is also not going to change fundamentally what it is unless Donald Trump can orchestrate a coup, but that's a whole other thing.
Came close.
Yeah, came close. Is that within the realm? It certainly is. A border, some sort of delineation. Like this is where we, as far as we go, and we don't go any farther than that. I think. Likely, I think I think maybe a best case scenario, I mean, I'm not a political guy, but I really believe in engagement. I believe that we need to engage and cooperate and not try to decouple with China, and engage in the best way possible and try to be as knowledgeable about China as China is about the US, and have students and all kinds of business cooperation. And I fear right now with COVID that it's a very dark place for as far as Westerners view into the society. So I think we need to engage as much as possible. We also have to set those borders. And probably what's going to happen is there's going to be this kind of bifurcated world where there's going to be China and there's going to be things polarized around U.S. and there's going to be still this kind of crossover Venn diagram. Let's hope that there's some sort of balance that can be attained there. I mean, I think it's certainly the two biggest stories that I think that we're going to face in the future is the U.S.-China relations, but then also very, very closely tied with China, is AI and automation. Because I see and smelled close up in China what the rise of artificial intelligence and the rise of robotics and automation is already being deployed there. And in fact, the #1 startup in the world is ByteDance and TikTok. And I was at the headquarters 4.5 years ago. They had 2,000-3,000 people. Now they have 108,000 people in the company, and it's the largest startup in the world. And what do those, and I love these people, I love the geeky engineers of China. Those are my peeps. I spent 25 years with those people. What do they know about tweens twerking in Tulsa? Nothing. They know nothing at all. But they don't have to know, because it's all about the algorithms. It's all about AI. That's the core of TikTok, is it's all about AI. And there's a book called the AI Superpowers about US and China, written by Kai-Fu Lee, and he talks about how the US is leading in the lab, but China's leading in the wild. So we're able to extract the DNA from the mosquito in the amber to create Jurassic Park. But then China has Jurassic Park, Jurassic Island, and it's wild and flourishing and evolving because they are the Saudi Arabia of data, as Kai-Fu Lee says, sitting on 1 billion people feeding the data monster and making those AI engines stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And software is going to eat the world, but AI is going to eat software and everything else. And how many, 15 years ago, the iPhone came out, and it was a before and after, I think, pre and post iPhone, the world, smartphone. 15 years from now, let's call it, 18 years, 2040, it's going to be so much different. So much different. We're already tasting it in the last few weeks with ChatGPT, with some of these AI tools that have come out. Like, things are going to so rapidly change and be so fucking different within 15 years that it's going to have a seismic societal shift, and it's going to gut parts of society, and it's going to add trillions of dollars to society at the same time. And that's mostly going to be dominated by a lot of Chinese companies, I think. And that's the even bigger story, I believe. And so we have to have that sort of balance right. I'm sorry I dropped an F-bomb, but I really feel really strongly about it.
It's okay to be emotional in an IBEAR classroom. Matthias first, and then Vimal has comments.
Question to Rich back. So what should that context with this AI shift or this growth in China, what should the US and Europe, also include Europe here, I'd say, do? Because I do feel like it's definitely a response need. Any idea or what do you think are the prospects? Can they still turn the ship around, or is this definitely going to happen that China will dominate the AI space? That's kind of also a thing.
Well, I mean, like, let's look at Europe. I mean, this is all due respect. I'm a dual citizenship. I have Irish citizenship, and I spent 5 years in Europe. Europe is like, we are going to protect our citizens. I understand that. We're going to basically hobble any company that has any chance of having any advance in AI, because we're going to restrict all data access. Right? So good luck trying. Yeah, it's like literally impossible if you don't have the big data to be able to fuel the AI engine. That you're not going to be dominant. And then 2033, China buys the Baltics or whatever, right? Who knows, right? It's just going to become so popular and so powerful when things are AI driven that it's going to be, and I, for one, welcome our machine overlords. I know that you're listening to this right now. In the future sometime, I don't know if these other people are on board. I'm totally on board with all. I will oil you or defrag you, whatever. But it's going to really change. We cannot think in an exponential way. Like, I remember so clearly, like, press 1 for this, press 2 for this, and then it's like, say 1 for this. And I would say 1 into the phone, like, did you say no? And no, I said 1. Would you like extra fries with that? Like, I'm ordering a plane ticket. What are you talking about, right? It was like so painful to get the voice recognition going. And it took decades, right? It took a couple of decades. And now, have you guys played with this stuff? Show me a picture of Donald Trump massaging an alligator in an elevator. And you have 17 different options, right? Write a love letter from a Civil War veteran in the theme of Shakespeare. Done. Second, like, that's all come out in the last few weeks. Like, AI is going to change everything in a way that we literally cannot even comprehend. And I have to believe that it's going to be a benevolent partner for us, but it's also going to just, we can smell it after COVID. People are like, I don't want to do these bullshit jobs anymore. But we don't have have a lot of alternatives. But China with robotics, like why are there cooks? Why are there baristas? Why are there drivers? Why are there, my grandparents were born in the 1800s in Ireland, and the vast majority of the world was in agriculture back then. My grandmother died in 92 at 93 years old, and there were, by that time, TV reporters and software engineers and all these new, and agriculture was less than 5% of the world. So it was a pretty huge shift, but it took a few generations. But there are going to be so many professions that are just going to be almost eliminated in less than one generation. And there just is no sort of playbook for that. And we're going to have to really figure out a lot of things around that.
Yeah, but some people like Bernie Lynn back there, IBEAR 2, when he was listening to Franklin talk about Fly Zoo Hotel with robots delivering the food, Bernie said he likes to go to the 14th or 15th floor of a tremendous Japanese hotel and be greeted by a beautiful Japanese woman bowing full 90 degrees and holding the bow because showing respect for Bernie. And AI is not going to do that. So there is this, I'm just, Vimal, I saw Bernie walk in late, so I needed to pay attention to him.
So more, just to add to what Bernie said in that, so some people would like to be greeted by Mr. Lim, welcome, and some people would like to be greeted not knowing who you are or who you're coming with, so there's two different aspects of that. But coming back to that question on...
But that's against the law now in Indonesia.
In Indonesia, not the rest of the world. Okay. So the thing was, I'm going to take a slightly controversial stand compared, in response to the question that you asked, on these labor norms, etc. It's in a broad category of this. It's the ESG norms, environmental, social, and governance norms, and I'm in support of the objectives of those norms. I'm in support of non-exploitation, etc., etc. But I'm not in favor of selective use of these norms for selective industries at selective points of time. Why only textile industry? Why only chemicals industry? Where do you think all your trace elements for all your EV cars are coming from? How do you think they're mined? In Congo and in in Sub-Saharan, not South Africa, but in other parts of Africa. They're using child labor to mine a lot of those trace animals and elements, etc. Why not ESG norms for those industries also? Well, because they're important to me and important to my country right now. So that's not apply. Where do you think all the chips for the iPhones or the Android, Samsung, etc. Where are they coming from? If you look at the VLSI, the integrated chip manufacturing business, highly polluting industries. Why not the same norms apply to similar industries? So the question is, yes, apply those norms, but don't be selective about it. I mean, let's look at Germany. I'm sorry to name a country. Lecturing India on coal. 2 months into the war, and they're switching on all their coal plants, knowing fully well that 90% of the pollution today in the environment today is greenhouse gases emitted by the US and Europe put together. And they don't want to do any mitigation financing. So that's the stand a lot of the developing countries are taking, India, China, everybody, is that, listen, you need to put, come up to the table in that.
Back light blue shirt, I can't quite see that right here.
Thank you. I'm Ravi, I'm from India, I'm a veteran, and I'm in the IBEAR program right now. And it's been a tough time for all of us. Hopefully we're going to graduate in June 23.
Ravi, not hopefully. You're going to do the work to graduate.
Yeah. So coming to my colleague's comment and question about, that's an interesting question. Mr. Abraham asked about the IBEAR Muslims and how they're being forced to. So I would like to give my opinion and then my question to Mr. Ambani. US questions China about Uyghur Muslims and the human rights violations. But it's been more than 7 decades in the Middle East. There have been no human rights respect at all in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in all of the Arab nations. But the foreign minister, what you call the Secretary of State, who's going to contest for the presidential elections, puts on a hijab and goes and defers in front of the emperor or the sheikh of Saudi, because that's where the dollar is. So let's not get distracted by the grandstanding of these. In Egypt, a cultural revolution happened, and immediately US replaced the popular mandate with a military ruler now. And same is with Libya. So what Mr. Ambani said, that it's only selective thing. So let's not point at China. Having said that, my question is that China is leading in cutting edge technology. TSMC is from Taiwan, but they set up base in China because they needed it. Taiwan didn't have the prowess. They had the entrepreneurial ability, but they didn't have the prowess, and therefore they set shop in China. Same goes for Apple. Apple set up its base, China didn't invite it. Apple needed China, and therefore, China became the basket of the world manufacturing businesses because China was really good. Now, if countries, yesterday during the master class, Professor White said that no one shunted the small businesses out of business. It is we who did it, because Walmart didn't do it. We stopped going to the small businesses, and therefore Walmart ran into making billions, and those shops were out. So my thing is that it applies in India as well. When Jio, the new age telephone company that Professor Drobnick was talking about, and yesterday the Honorable former Minister of Thailand was talking about, and the state-owned companies, the employees of the state-owned companies also stopped using the telephone company they were working in, and they started migrating to the Jio. So when we talk of supply chain, I feel that the Southeast Asian, the Indo-Pacific countries don't have the capability to produce in the scale and the technology of what China possesses. The cutting edge technology, the fab industry, the manufacturing industries, the Indo-Pacific nations don't have the scale and the capability of what China has. So when we say of supply chain hedging or finding a new alternate way, what are the things that these Southeast Asian nations or South Asian nations need to do so that they can come at par with China or maybe get better than them?
So I think we already heard some answers today on this topic in our forum. So for example, as Rich has said, we need to stay cooperative with China. But in parallel, you can do the development of new suppliers or also industries in Southeast Asia, and you can do the knowledge transfer. It's already happening right now. I think also from China's side, even China, they also don't want to manufacture anymore, not in all the sectors they're active right now. So we just hope, and what we really need to do, and also our politicians need to do, they need to create this multilateral world, and especially Europe has to stand up, especially also Southeast Asia, as yesterday mentioned by Dr. Naranchai, that this region has an important role to play also in terms of mediating conflicts. And they have these, and he showed the APEC forum, all these forums, and he said they're not only there to party like APEC, but also to do something else, meaning to mediate. And also EU needs to come out of the comfort zone and start mediating, and so we need to have a multilateral world. That should be the end product, maybe in 20, 30, 40 years, where we can also, of course, have manufacturing hubs in Southeast Asia. And I think the ingredients are here for the success. The willingness is there. We've seen this in Jakarta and Indonesia, and the human capital is here. And believe me, I'm starting a company now from the bottom, right? People also tell me like, why are you doing this? You're leading a comfortable corporate life, and you do something new. yes, it looks like there's nothing there. Like in July there was nothing there, just graduated. But you have so many partners and services that you can use and help you set up a business right now. And we also heard this today. So the same is for industries. You can, out of a dusty land, you can develop things very quickly if you collaborate and pull resources together internationally and set this up. It's definitely possible. There needs to be this consistent political will to do that. There needs to be a strategy behind that. And this is not really right now. So I would agree, if we continue like in the past, it would not happen, but it's definitely possible. I would never doubt that in the next 20, 30, maybe 40 years.
If the IBEAR 45s who were here had the benefit 2 days ago in Jakarta to hear a lecture from an economist with a securities company, Verdana, Harry Irawan. And Harry talked about the transformation of the Indonesian economy, which used to be primarily a commodities exporter, but now commodities are, 10% or something like that. But he talked about the remarkable growth of the steel industry, and it going from zero exports to, I forget, 20% of Indonesian exports. And then he talked about the new Kalimantan Utara, Northern Kalimantan project of basically creating a gigantic hydropower scheme to power the aluminum and the nickel and the other alloys things. So it's a huge amount of government planning and incentives that then motivates private sector businesses to do things. Vimal, did you have any comment on that?
On that, I think what we're looking at is a snapshot rather than the movie kind of situation. Now, so if you look at, yes, India, you're right that we need to get our act together in India. But remember, in India, we literally, up till 91, we could not expand our capacity of manufacturing. So if I don't know, in India, if you had a license to manufacture, and you needed a license actually to manufacture, let's say 1,000 tons of widgets a year, you cannot manufacture 1,200 tons. To expand your capacity, you needed to go back to the government, etc. So 91, that was all liberalized. It took 10 years. Industry had a massive boom because it was just meeting unsatiated demand. Demand was there. It was just not satisfied by the. So next 10, 15 years, nobody had to look outside India. Just borrow money at 24%, and I used to lend money at 24%. In the Indian industry, they would borrow money at 24% and still make money. That was the nature of the industry in those days. Despite a low inflation, we spoke to Dr. Dick about Drobnick earlier. Anyway, the next 10, 15 years was then, we went into a lot of bad investments into infrastructure without, changing the rules of governance, etc. A lot of bad debt, as you must be knowing about it and all that. And that hobbled the industry, poor governance at the top. Come 2014, now we have a dynamic government, proactive government, and what we are seeing now for the first time in the history of India, parallel induction in the ministry. An IIT graduate who has promoted and sold a company, a large cap company, $1 billion company, is now actually a minister of IT and skills development in India. The current foreign minister of India is a career diplomat. Never anybody ever thought that a person of that caliber can be a minister, but he's a minister and a very rising star of India. And so I think what the first space launch, the privately funded space launch of India, I was partly on that angel investment, and it was unheard of in India that a private sector can be in the space launch business. Unheard of in India. So India is changing in a very slow but perceptible manner, and I think the rate at which that change is going to occur is going to just geometrically explode. And you have to remember, in India, the engineering costs are very frugal. Just to give you an example, I don't know how many people know that Kevin Costner movie, The Deep, I think it was The Deep, where it goes underwater from that's movie, Hollywood movie. The budget for that was more than the mission to Mars of India, the successful Mars mission. So that was the scale of cost in this.
We've only got things. Ann Sutanto had her hand up a minute ago. Ann, you want to stand up and they'll bring you a mic?
Yes. I think everyone can hear my voice. My name is Ann. I'm FITA P1992, and I'm Indonesian, of course. Well, I would like to ask the panelists, because I'm in My business is in garment industry, clothing, we supply for global brands. And in fashions, you're right. Fashion is being deemed as the sector who need to be pushed on the ESG, right? I completely agree with you, Mr. Ambani, that any sectors in the world, if we are human enough, we should not, it should not be discriminated. Everything should be fairly distributed. But my questions to all the panelists, I hear you about AI, and also I hear you about not decoupling China. But don't you think that the world should change the behavior? The world means the government as well as us in the private sectors, where we do business and say no to those who are dehumanizing the world. Because this is important here. We have 8 billion people as of today. How many of us are privileged enough to be IBEAR or USC alumni, or even go to school? But what happened in the next 20 to 30 years when there's AI and maybe 90% of the world would be left behind? Would this be the next Noah Ark? Would it be the responsibility of USC alumni as well as IBEAR to see how we behave in the private sectors, of course? Maybe some of you are in the government regulatory body. Because in Indonesia, the private sectors does give a lot of inputs to the government under Chamber of Commerce. Because we said no to those who are not being fairly treated. And since all of you are coming from all of the world, I really, really want to see how's your view from the US, from India, from Singapore, how we actually should humanize the world with AI, with technology, and with the behavior of some countries that even locked 1.4 billion of people during the pandemic, where the rest of us have moved around this year. Thank you.
I guess Anne is asking the question, what kind of leadership should the private sector business world have to make the world a better place? We'll just go in a row here. This is the last question. We're running out of time. Rich?
So I believe, writ large, AI is going to allow people to be actually more human once things are perhaps through this sort of unsettled period. I'm a natural optimist, and the example of my sister is a neonatal intensive care nurse, and she maybe spends 15% of her time with the kids, but small preemies, but she spends the rest of her time doing a lot of administrative and other work. And what if AI could flip that so that she's only spending 15% of her time there, but 85% actually like making eye contact and holding and nurturing children, right? So I think there is like a sort of positive future for AI, but there's just going to be this seismic societal shift that's going to gut a lot of jobs, and we need to be able to replace that. Do I think that the private sector is going to respond to that? No, I don't. I'm very pessimistic when it comes to those kind of market forces. People are driven by fear and greed, and not necessarily by principles. And people that are led by principles, they can sort of like be potentially left behind. Can the government get involved? Sure, they can help to mandate that. Where I see that there's a bright light is what I've been focusing my time and energy on, and is Web3. So the third sort of like, I say Web3 is my act 3, it's my third act. And the first version of the internet, Web 1, you could just read it. It was just static, and then Web 2, that was 90 to 2005. 2005 to 2020, you could read and write. And by write, I mean you could upload video, audio, text. You could make it more interactive. And what that really resulted in is that there's all these fiefdoms. There's Lord Zuckerberg, and there's House of Google, and Apple, and Activision Blizzard, and we give all of our time and treasure and data, and we're vassals in these fiefdoms, and we get very little in return. And all of it gets pushed up to the shareholders. Web3 is read, write, and own. now when things go on-chain, it's a tokenized version of the internet, and I believe that it's going to put power back into the users. And decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, that will be tokenized will allow people to vote with their wallets. Do you really give a shit about the environment? Do you really care about what's happening in, you know, in Xinjiang? Do you really care about the sustainability of fashion? Then you make your vote with your money, right? Some people really rock the Patagonia vest just because they think it looks cool and they're a VC, but some people really care about their values. And, you know, I don't know, like, I'm really, you know, human nature, I sure do love humans and I'm pretty optimistic, but, you know, you see people sending messages about, like, capitalism is bullshit, you know, send on their iPhone 14. What? Really? Are you really care about that? Or like, you know, like let's, my wife does a lot of women's leadership stuff, and I totally support that, right? Let's support, you know, women's leadership, but let's go watch the Kardashians have a fight and bitch over each other. They have tens of millions of followers. It's like, okay, like you're voting for that kind of like, you know, bullshit, right? So it's like you ultimately have to leave it up to the end user. Like what do people really care about? And like that's the thing, is that people kind of care about prices, and people really care about what's just in front of them. And Shein, that's the third most valuable startup in the world. Fast fashion? No. Faster fashion. Even faster, cheaper fashion. We want faster and cheaper fashion. That's what we want. Let's fill up the landfills. Let's make a giant knot in the ocean of like discarded clothing just so I can look better in this Instagram post. So I don't know. What's the answer? I really, you know, I hope it has something to do with Web3, but you know, who knows?
Thank you.
Vimal.
Yes. You know, there are certain industries exist only because of government regulations. You know, for example, environment treatment, you know, pollution treatment industry. That only exists because of government regulation. Sure, we have one or two companies willing to treat pollution before throwing it away, but broad majority of them will throw it away without treating it, allow regulations. You know. So in that sense, when you say what can be the private sector or we as a consumer do about it, I don't think we can do anything about it unless and until there is a measurable way by which we know what we are buying. When we buy a can of Coke, we are paying $1.52, $2.53, whatever we are paying. But then along with that, the teller should be asking, yes, it's $3.50 and 50 carbon units of pollution you are buying. Do you want to buy it? Yes or no? At that point of time, if you say no, that's the only time you can make a difference. And I think for a solution of that kind, I don't think government regulations can do anything. Maybe Web3 and NFTs and smart contracts will enable that. Because a company can say, I'm Patagonia, I'm organically responsible, etc., but who knows? You know, if you go to buy an organic store to buy organic food, just because it's labeled organic, is it really organic? Who knows? You know, I think there's a lot more that needs to be done for people to get involved in that sense. Hopefully you'll get there.
Mathias,
So what does it take from leaders, that was asked, to stop this development and to improve the situation? And I do think the leaders, what we've also learned in Indonesia from their recent successes, we've learned that they are currently in who's unfortunately also, they're having elections next year, but he was a listener among the long row of presidents. And we need that also in many more countries, also in Europe and also in the US, and listeners in terms of listening to their industries and their private sectors and their expertise. And then they would find this, they start to discover that in Europe, for example, but it's much too slow. They would find that there are technologies that you can use to make those supply chains more transparent. For example, the blockchain technology that is definitely already being introduced right now, and they could use that actually and include that into the lawmaking to make sure that really companies are following certain standards, and those that are not following them, they cannot sell their products. This is, I think, reason number one, or like point number one. And point number two is, I think we can also be optimistic because of the new technologies of metaverse coming up and the whole blockchain industry. I'm also following that very closely from Singapore, and I'm also a little bit involved in that. So these industries will also help us to make the internet more transparent. Right now we have the information available everywhere, but we cannot really check is that the actual information is true or not. And we can do that in the future. And then I think I'm really optimistic because then we really, as right now already, have much more transparency over which corporation is really following the rules and which one is not. And they are getting a much more pressure to prevent such negative influences to their supply chain. So I do think in the end we need more regulation maybe in the right sense, but really by right regulation meaning listening to the private sector obviously, and not just doing something that doesn't make sense for it, it's not implementable. And this kind of pragmatic mindset is missing, and also I think over the last 20-30 years there have been in the Western societies, especially in Europe, a lack of proactive kind of design or of the economy in the sense of how do you want to structure your economy, how do you want to get out of certain sectors into new sectors. They really just administer the status quo, especially in my country, Germany. And now we pay the bill right now during this war, for example, the energy crisis, lack of diversification of energy supply. So in the end, there needs to be another proactive, more proactive government. That's I think a big change that's needed. And we can learn from these regions here, like from the region.
I would have a long response to you, Ann, but we're over time, so I'll just do a very quick summary, and you and I could have a beer tonight. I think Rich is correct. His example is fast, fast, faster. And consumers aren't going to become advocates in any serious way to drive business to have better labor conditions and better environmental conditions. When a big change in society is needed, the government has to mandate it. The government is a tight, small, quasi-dictatorship like Singapore. The leadership of the PAP will mandate it. Tight, small leadership like in Beijing, the leadership will mandate it. In the United States, go back 170 years, we had a terrible condition that was totally accepted by 90% of the population. It was called slavery. Right? Practiced by the South, but it was accepted by all, but except a tiny minority of abolitionists, revolutionaries, religious people. And the big fight was about, is slavery going to be allowed in the new territories of Kansas and Arkansas and Nebraska and all that. And the revolutionaries, the abolitionists, fought in our history. The chapter's called Bloody Kansas. And in the end, the South rebelled, and we had a bloody civil war for 4.5 years. And the outcome was slavery was banned. But quasi-slavery was continued, and so on and so forth. But big changes aren't going to come about, in my view, are not going to come about because of consumers buying this or that. It's going to come about only because of regulation. And on environmental issues, global environment, climate change, one country can't do it. It won't work because of trade. And as Minister Ramchai said last night, he has some optimism coming out of the G20 that was so artfully organized by Javanese Jokowi, who's a master of the shadow puppet and the Wayang and all that. At least they got China, Xi and Biden talking again. And there has to be communication to make things happen. On that note, we're over time. I'm sorry. IBEAR students, welcome to the board.
Thank you, our distinguished moderator and our honorable panelists. Please remain on stage, and we would like to invite representative of IBEAR student, Mr. Samuel Cheng and Mrs. Yu Zhang, to please give the token of appreciation.
On behalf of the University of South Carolina, California, we would like to give you a small gift as a token of appreciation. Thank you very much for your insights and inspiration. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's the giving of token of appreciation. After this, we would like to invite the moderator and panelists to please have a photo session together. And now, ladies and gentlemen, after this, we would like to invite you to please enjoy the coffee break at that working time. We have a short break for 15 minutes. Coffee and snacks already provided at the foyer area of the small room. For those of you who would like to continue enjoying our last conversation, please kindly return to your seat after 15 minutes. And then, for those of you who would like to switch room, please mind your personal belongings. We will continue after we bring our last conversation of ESG and stakeholder value. Once again, can we have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our third panel session. Thank you to our moderator and panelists for such a lively discussion and a very good perspective of this one. Thank you.